Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the Hazards of the Old Ones, Part 3, Chapter 27, The George Wind. And I apologize for the lateness of this video during these holiday seasons, because when the great Christmas snowstorm of 2020 blew in, which wasn't really that much snow, but it was a lot of wind and it was pretty cold, our cable and internet went the hell out. And our service provider, who will remain nameless, Spectrum, didn't get it back up until just now, about almost 4 days later. But we are back, and we are broadcasting as usual. And you have to forgive my voice. I caught something. It wasn't coof. I tested negative for that. It's something else, but it kicked my butt. And it's still an issue to some extent. Last week, we learned all about Lord Milton and his high-tath condition. Even though I had spilled the beans previously, we got a full lowdown. Even though this lowdown isn't quite current, as the books have progressed, the high-tath lore has changed a little bit since they were first introduced in this book over 10 years ago. That's just a natural progression of things. Sometimes you don't think of certain aspects until later on. It's just the way it goes. And then the King of Xandar threw a little dinner party thanking all involved for coming to Xandar's aid, including, most of all, Carahil. Carahil can't help himself and hit everybody there in the face with a pie. Good, clean fun. It's just what he is. And he even says, hey, what's a pie in the face? I have anointed you as the good people, as the best of people. Even though that's not what it said in this book. There's a lot of different versions of this text in different revisions that I wrote. And some of the ones that I'm reading in this book aren't present in some of my favorite lines, and they're not there, and it pisses me off. So I'm going to have to go through and put the hammer down and consolidate this text and maybe issue yet another revision of this book. Today, we have some housekeeping to do, and if you're perceptive and if you've been paying attention, you'll notice a couple of characters that were prominent in the narrative have vanished. And as we get close to the end of the book, that is not a good thing. We can't have the old vanishing character. We gotta resolve some of these character arcs. And we're gonna do that right now. Chapter 27, The George Wind. And then after this is chapter 27 again. There's a misprint in this book. How that happened, I have no idea. So the next chapter after that is also chapter 27. But this is a kind of getting on a longer chapter, so I probably won't have time to get to it this week. We'll do that after Christmas. Consider it a Christmas gift. So then, let's proceed immediately. Part 3, chapter 27. The first chapter 27, The George Wind. Kai and Sig crawled through the small passageway. It was just a warm-up run, Sig had said, though Kai strained and grunted to keep up. To give Kai a mild introduction into castle exploration, Sig had picked an easy run, at least an easy one for her. It started near the south wing of the castle, in the small lavender chapel of Countess Harmonard, Dav's great-grandmother. The chapel was a last-second choice. Sig had planned to take Kai to the northern end of the castle and take an easy tunnel out to the grove, but Sig thought she'd seen a ghost coming out of the chapel, so she changed her mind and sent Kai crawling through the chapel's tunnel. From there, the passage, about 2 feet high, rambled on at a gentle slope ending in a small chamber once filled with wine. Sig moved through the small passage like a gopher, completely at home in the tight space. Tweeter bounced along, his light making the need for flashlights moot. Kai followed behind her as best she could, seeing the soles of Sig's feet strain as she crawled. Kai was amazed that a woman who never wore shoes had such clean, soft feet. It must be a black hat thing. Sig paused and turned. Okay, Kai, up ahead is a little squeeze. It's not as bad as it looks. Just remember to relax and deflate your lungs. Then we'll be in the chamber. Creation, I wish Dav was here with us. Davidge was away at the fleet, getting Kai's field admittance passed through channels. Tomorrow, Kai will go to Fleet Command in Armenelos, fill out her papers, and oath in. She was going to have to stay at Fleet Building for a few days, as this process wasn't going to be quick. Then she will get her cherished uniforms at long last. Illuminated in Tweeter's soft silver glow, she watched Sig's feet disappear into what looked like an impossibly small crack in the stone. After a moment, she could see Sig's flashlight lighting up the crack from the other side. "Come on, Kai," she said. With a chirp, Tweeter hopped through the crack. Kai crawled up to the crack and, after fumbling around for a moment or two, began pulling herself through, feeling the rough stone jabbing into her belly. After a bit of struggling, she made it into the chamber. Once inside, she found Sig sitting up, cross-legged, eating a pastry from her pack. She offered one to Kai, who took it and popped it into her mouth. Dav tells me that this place was once used to store illegal wines and spirits. Apparently, Dav's ancestors couldn't resist fermenting Zaffin choker wines. The cheeky devils. Talk about a skeleton in the closet. Kai looked around, savoring the feel of the place. It hadn't taken long for Sig's love of crawling around in the dark to rub off on her. The age, the history of the place. She was going to have to bring her husband in here. No doubt he'd find it fascinating. There were a number of earthen jugs stacked up against one of the walls. Overhead was a small shaft cut through the stone for a dumbwaiter. "What's this?" Kai asked, grabbing one of the jugs. Nothing," Sig said innocently. "Nothing? Huh?" Kai said, uncorking it. She took a sniff. "Hey!" she exclaimed. She took the jug and tossed it back, taking a few generous swallows. "Sig, this is Morning Glow. That good stuff made from Nadine syrup. What's the deal? Dav swore up and down to me he didn't make it here anymore." "Well, Kai, it's not something we talk about too much. Morning Glow is moonshine, after all. We signed a treaty with League regulators that we wouldn't distill it any longer. But, the staff appreciates it from time to time, and for special occasions, Kai tossed back a few more swigs. Where's this dumbwaiter go?" "I don't know," Sig said, blushing. "Sig, you and Dav owe me about 10 of these jugs. My family back on Onaris just loves this stuff, and I hate to break it to you, but pretty much all the Nadine syrup I take home ends up getting cooked into moonshine anyway, but we can never get it as good as this." "Wow!" She took another swig. "Shouldn't have brought me in here. Sig, now the cat's out of the bag." "I suppose not." Kai corked her jug and found something to scratch her name onto the side. As she scratched, she listened to Sig rattle on. "Did you notice that there were 4 side passages along the way in here?" "Nope," she said, scratching her name onto a few more jugs. "There were. You gotta keep your eyes open or you'll miss things. We'll head to Countess Harmonard's chapel next." "We were just in her chapel." "Well, that's the one on the surface. There's a hidden one as well, and it's neat. She was a remarkable woman." "These chapels always creep me out," Kai said. "Why?" "Don't know. They just do." Sig laughed. "Well, come on, you big baby. It's not far from here. Follow me." As Sig crawled back through the crack, Kai readied herself for the squeeze and turned to collect Tweeter. "Come on, Tweets," she said. He was sitting on a bundle of cloth at the far end of the chamber. Kai took her appropriated jugs and made to wrap them up in it, worried that the staff would come down the dumbwaiter and crack into her stash. She jumped in horror as she threw the cloth aside. "Sig! Wait, what's this?" Sig turned. Lying in a heap in the back of the chamber was the body of a girl, a villager formerly hidden by the cloth. "It's Charlene, one of the cooks," Sig said. Kai rolled her small body over and found a jagged wound in her chest. "Murdered," Kai said, "at least a day or two. But I just saw her this morning in the east wing." "Then we've a cloaked intruder roaming around in the castle, and I'll bet I can guess who it is." Princess Rock? "Yep, that's my first thought. I figured we'd be hearing from her again after Xandar." They tended to the body as best they could. They would be back for her later. They had more pressing issues at the moment. They emerged from the chapel and made their bustling way to the kitchens. There the staff was busy as usual, making this and that. They didn't see Charlene anywhere. Sig pulled her head of staff aside and ordered her to quietly get everybody into their rooms and lock their doors. She wanted the hallways cleared. "Now we've just got to find her," Sig said. "She could be anywhere in this maze." Kai had a thought. She took Tweeter off her shoulder and held him in her palm. "Tweeter, there is a cloaked intruder in the castle, possibly a female named Princess Rock of Xandar. Can you find her for us?" Tweeter took flight and turned to the north, Sig and Kai following. He flew through several corridors and halls until he passed into one of the grand halls leading to the cavernous main ballroom. Far down the hallway they spied someone standing on a tall ladder, cleaning the high overhead vault. A bucket, various cleaning supplies, and a small wagon covered with a tarp were arranged at the base of the ladder. Tweeter flapped around the person, who, annoyed, tried to wave him away. Sig stopped, straining to see in the dark. She saw that the maid standing on the ladder was not cleaning, but instead was holding some sort of small square device, was trying to hide it in the crevices of the vault. Kai looked. "Sig, that's an explosive," she said under her breath. Sig loosed a blast of silver tech down the hallway. The person hanging onto the ceiling by her fingertips coiled her body out of the way, and the top of the ladder was blasted out from under her. She hung there for a moment and then dropped, landing like a cat. A few small squares of ochre-colored explosives fell out of her pockets and scattered on the floor. Charging, Sig tried to rope the woman. Jumping about like an acrobat, the woman deftly leapt out of the way. She threw her cloak aside, and there was Princess Rock of Xandar, smiling, tiny, and quite insane. "Hello," she said. "You're my father's harlot, are you not?" She picked up a square of explosive, tapped a button, and threw it at Kai. Quickly reacting, Sig surrounded it in a silver spear, and there was a muffled explosion within. The princess picked up another one and made to enable it, when a leaping Kai tagged her square across the jaw, sending her and the explosive flying. A small controller fell out of her hand, a remote. With it, she could light the whole works. Hitting the floor, the princess clawed for the remote, Kai landing on top of her, struggling to hold her back, amazed by her strength and tenacity. "Tweeter!" she yelled. "Get that controller out of here and hide it somewhere." Tweeter chirped and, seizing the controller in his tiny silver feet, flew off with it, just barely avoiding Rock's grasping fingers. Laboring through the air, he flew down the corridor and turned out of sight. Kai, sitting on top of Rock, rolled her over and ready to start wailing, when in 3 quick movements the princess kicked her in the thigh, the gut, and the face, easily the hardest kick she'd ever felt. Sig was red-faced with fury. "Get out of the way, Kai!" she roared, wanting to devastate this pesky princess. Kai's thigh was dead, numb. She couldn't move fast enough. Enraged, Sig made to seize her in a TK. As before, the princess wafted and reappeared to Sig's right. She belted Sig one. She was a master at that tactic, and it was frustratingly effective. Sig couldn't do anything fast enough to keep her from wafting. Sig dropped to a knee with the force of the blow. The princess unsaddled her baron and showed it to Sig. "Remember this?" she panted, its thin blade invisible as usual, only its silver hilt glinted in the half-light. "This time, you'll die by it." Sig tried to stand, and the princess butt-ended her in the nose. She went down on all fours, stunned. "I was planning on having a nice blast here. I was going to blow this whole damn castle apart and watch it burn. But since you've interrupted me, I'll simply kill every living soul here personally, starting with you, harlot. Sig, still recovering from the blow, tried to rise, but Vrock pushed her back down with her boot. She raised the Baron over her head with both hands. Goodbye. She brought it down in a blur. Clang! The invisible Baron, light and rapier-like, crossed with the strong, heavy shaft of Captain Davidge's carg. Davidge stood there, eyes blazing. I'm home, Sig, he said quietly. Vrock's eyes flickered and twitched. She giggled. Father, welcome home. I was just making dinner for you. Hope you like it. She gave Sig a savage kick in the gut as Kai limped to her side. Kai, get Sig out of here and clear the castle. Now, he growled. Not a chance, Sig said, recovering. She was red-faced with rage and loosed a fast sten. Again, Vrock wafted out of the way, reappearing to Sig's right. The Baron came whistling, Sig's neck its destination. Clang! Dav's carg intercepted it at the last second. The princess grinned. Kai tried to engage her, but was floored with a whistling punch to the jaw. They crossed weapons and fenced for a moment, exchanging positions with the waft several times. Vrock's skill was incredible. She moved constantly, keeping Davidge between herself and Sig, who was burning to kill her with Silvertech. Vrock, insane or not, was a fighting master. A Silvertech seeker formed in the air, its miniature battle-shot ports open, ready to fire. It banked, looking for a clear shot. Grinning, the princess kept moving. Sig couldn't open up without mowing down Dav and Kai as well. As Davidge and Vrock clashed blades, a ladder came whooshing into the back of her legs, knocking her down. Kai, ever the brawler, had the melted remains of the ladder and was swinging it around. Recovering quickly, the princess shrugged off her surprise and went on the attack, swerving through the rungs, toying with Kai. She could put her blade through Kai's neck at her leisure. Sight, Kai dead, run through with the Baron. Vrock managed to get very close to Kai despite the swinging ladder, and nearly broke her kneecap with a devastating kick to the right knee. Kai's improvised weapon, instead of helping her, was turning into a huge hindrance as Vrock deftly moved around and threw it. The Seeker moved around for a clear shot. Vrock maneuvered Kai in front of her, again thwarting its tiny guns. Then she kicked Kai in the knee again. Kai collapsed, and in a quick movement, Vrock had her Baron up in the high guard and was ready to skewer her with it. This fight could only go badly. Davidge tackled Vrock and then long wafted. He had to get Vrock alone. He had to get Sig and Kai out of the picture. This princess was a fighting machine, and with Sig and Kai around to use as deadly props and obstacles, he couldn't possibly fight her with any hope of winning. Poof! They re-emerged several halls away. Davidge, barely conscious, slumped to the floor, his heart pounding from the strain. He could barely lift his carg. Davidge! Sig screamed in his mind, in a total panic. Vrock smiled and kicked him square in the jaw, sending him flying. Just the two of us. How sweet! The two of them were swallowed up in the immensity of the empty hall. She readied her Baron and made to gut him with it. At the last moment, the card came up and met it, Davidge rising weakly to one knee. Toying with him, Vrock pushed his weapon away and belted him in the jaw, rocking him backwards. Where are you, Dav? Dav, guide me! Came Sig, her telepathy broken and halting. Her telepathy only got that way when she was very, very upset. Hysterical. Clashing again, they forced their weapons together, making a screech of sparks. If your goal was to make me hate you, you've succeeded, he rasped, still not fully recovered from the waft. My goal, Princess said through clenched teeth. My goal is to make you love me, Father. That's all I wanted. And all I ever got was scorn and contempt. Even the 11th daughter deserves a bit of love from her father. Dav, please! They circled, their booted footfalls echoing in the huge space. Then, the Baron moving in an invisible cloud, the princess attacked. Slash! The blade went through his coat and tickled his chest, drawing blood. Davidge wheezed for air. The blade chopped down on his wrist, penetrating flesh through the thick fabric of his fleet coat. The blade punctured his shirt, dappled red. Princess, your father is dead, back on Xandar. You killed him. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. They circled again, Davidge readied, and this time he sent the carg down toward her chest, regardless of the cutting snips she applied to him. She tried to parry, but the heavy carg was simply too massive, and the Baron's dainty blade bent. The hoard of the carg smashed into her chest, breaking 3 ribs and tearing open a huge bleeding gash. She recoiled, wheezing for breath. "Good one, father," she rasped. Moving as though nothing had happened, she came again, the Baron darting with master strokes, this way, that way, feint, slash, stab. He was pressed to his limits. The carg was simply too heavy for such an intense fencing match of this level of fury, with a light, quick weapon like the Baron wielded by a master. If he tried to haul back and apply a killing shot, she laced him with quick, wounding cuts. His saving grace was that unless she managed to run him through, she couldn't kill him outright with 1 or 2 cuts. She'd need a lot. She'd need to take him apart. The bad thing, she was well on her way to doing that, with her invisible fluted blade finding its mark again and again. His arms and chest were saturated with red, tattered cloth. Soon, very soon, he would be sliced to ribbons. Were it not for his sight illuminating the blade as an ebon image, he might already be dead. He needed a different weapon, and he needed time to catch his breath from the waft. He had a thought. He wafted a bit down the hall. "Oh, where you going?" she said, calling after him with a maniacal, echoing voice. "You want me? You may come and get me." She wafted, following him. Davidge wafted again. Again they wafted, making a long circuit through the castle. Fortunately, they encountered nobody along the way, Sig apparently having gotten everybody either out or safely in their rooms. "You're starting to bore me, father." Finally, at long last, he appeared where he wanted, the giant Capricos Hall, the high ceiling fluttering with house banners, the walls lined with ancient Los Capricos weapons. There were hundreds of them, intricate weapons of all kind. Most of them didn't work. They were simply well-made mock-ups. A few, however, did work. One in particular worked quite well. Vrock, holding her Baron at the ready, looked around. "I like what you've done with the place. I like it a lot." Davidge smiled. "Then you will love this." A thin, elaborate sword, brass, enameled in black, hopped off the wall on its own accord and began streaking through the air towards Vrock. She heard it at the last second and turned to parry, her Baron crossing with the elegant brass sword held by nobody. "What's this?" "That, princess, is the George Wind, the Los Capricos weapon of House Hanover, my mother's house. You say you've been studying me your whole life. Then you should know my mother, Lady Hermelane, taught me to sword fight with the George Wind when I was a child, well before I learned to use the carg. The George Wind floats. It needs no hand to wield it if one knows its lore." The George Wind, floating on air, clashed with the Baron in a flurry of strokes and cuts. Slash! The weapon found its mark, cutting her in the leg. Slash! Her left arm was bleeding. Slash! A nick on her face. Davidge's control of the ancient weapon was precise. He sat down at the huge wooden dining table and watched, letting the horn of his carg rest on the floor. Given pause, he felt his strength returning. "My mother once chased me through the castle with this very weapon, dancing it at my throat, hacking my clothing to bits. I firmly believe she'd gone mad and was determined to kill me with it. But no, she just wanted me to become an expert swordsman and be creative in a fight. What do you think of it? How do you like it?" "Fight me like a man," she screeched, panting as the George Wind pressed her to her considerable limits. "Oh, what's the matter? You were perfectly happy fighting me with my huge cleaver. Don't like fencing with a light sword to match yours, do you?" Vrock was ripped down the length of her arm. She winced in pain. She tried to sidestep around the George Wind and engage him when, from the far end of the hall, a small ball of silver light entered. It was Tweeter, his little wings flapping like in a silver flutter. A moment later, the Seeker banked into the hall, and a moment after that, Kai came limping in. She stopped and pulled the Mount Calm, a wooden club of House Hanover, off the wall, and charged. There was murder in her large brown eyes. Vrock watched her advance, smiling. The Seeker loosed 2 tiny silver canisters and Vrock wafted aside. Davidge and Kai also had to jump away as the small explosions blew a hefty piece out of the dining table. Vrock emerged, ready to take on Davidge, the Jord Wind, Kai, and the Seeker all at once. Sig suddenly appeared from a waft behind her and ran two long, saber-like silver claws through Vrock's tiny midsection. Vrock arched back and screamed. "I gotcha, bitch!" Sig slavered, pushing her claws in deeper and deeper. Reeling, Vrock wafted and was gone just as Kai closed with her. Sig quickly dispersed her claws and ran to Davidge. Seeing his wounds, she tenderly kissed him. "She's not getting away," Davidge said, lighting his sight. He looked this way and that. Then he found her in a clearing just beyond the castle perimeter. She was staggering to a hidden ripcar, grabbing the George Wind out of the air. Davidge saddled his carg and wafted after her. "Wait, Dav, I'm coming with you. Which way is she? Wait!" Sig cried, but too late. Davidge was gone. Vrock, shaking, in pain from her cuts and her broken ribs, going into shock from the deadly wounds Sig inflicted on her, slowly lifted the ripcar into the air. She was frightened. She didn't know what to say to her father. She'd made a mess of things. He will punish her and call her worthless, his damned 11th daughter. Wait. Her father was dead. Somebody killed him. Mother, too, dead. Her whole family was dead. Who could do such a thing? She did it. She killed them. The Black Hats. They would not be quiet. They wouldn't let her sleep. They said kill them, and she did so she could rest. The Black Hats, monster with cat eyes, pulled her off the meat hook, and she owed them. The Black Hats made her strong, filled her head with knowledge and fighting skill. She missed her family, hated her family. The Black Hats were speaking to her now.
"Kill them. Kill everyone."
She looked back at the castle. She'd have to try a new approach. Maybe a poof! Davidge wafted into the shallow cockpit of her ripcar. "This is my ripcar!" she wailed, reaching for her Baron, shaking off her injuries and moving like lightning. Even wounded and insane, this tiny little girl was incredibly fast and strong, socking Davidge several times in the face. As they jostled about in the ripcar, they barely noticed that the car was heading straight for a high tower, Joliet Tower to be precise. They both barely had time to waft away as the car smashed against the sturdy red side of the castle. Down below, they both reappeared, crashing into a steep pinnacle spire of Josephina Tower on the castle's sheer west face, once one of Lady Pardoc's favorite towers. Baron and George Wind crossing, they struggled to hold on to the steep shingled spire. They slid down to the bottom, there being just enough of a rim for them to stand on, a 4,000-foot drop looming just beyond. As bits of the destroyed ripcar came smoking down in a shower of debris, they clashed weapons. Davidge let go of his small blade, and it began dancing as before on its own, pressing Vrock, pressing the Baron, its advantage of invisibility and speed negated. The wind at this height was tremendous, a blowing gale threatening to unseat them up both off their unsteady perch. Davidge's coattails and Vrock's flight jacket flapped. Vrock became frustrated and, in a lightning move, pinned the George Wind, and she drew her thrumming Mazin. Davidge grabbed her wrist and drew his Mims. They stood there for a bit in the howling wind. They could feel the slight sway of the tower and 4,000 feet of nothing just an inch away. Vrock discharged her Mazin, an angry rush of green energy pouring out of the solid barrel, thrumming with energy. "Let me go, father." Davidge pulled the hammer back on his Mims, the long barrel going slightly up Vrock's nose. "I am not your father. For my wife, and for my son, I should pull this trigger and put an end to you once and for all." Vrock grimaced and let go of her gun, the Mazin spinning down the sheer face of the tower. "I almost wish you would. Who shall miss House Xandar's 11th daughter, a waste of Zaphan's skin? You won't miss me, will you, father?" With a burst of dying strength, she wrenched her hand free and dropped off the rim, her body and hair fading into the distance like a fluffy blue pom-pom. Davidge slung the George Wind. He dropped off as well and wafted beneath the falling Vrock, landing a stunning blow onto her unsuspecting face. She wafted, emerging several yards north, again wafting into a waiting Davidge fist. Again she wafted, and again she got socked. Davidge's sight, his ability to see the near future, what could she do? He tortured her all the way down to the bottom, pounding her relentlessly. For all she had done, for Sig's torment, for his sister's agony, for attempting to destroy his home, and for all of Xandar, she was going to pay. They got to the bottom, and the crags near the woods. Vrock emerging from the waft, a bleeding, toothless disaster. She skittered into the ground. She lay there in the dirt and loose rocks, blood coming in broken strings from her mouth, blood pouring from her midsection, little bits of leaves and dirt in her blue hair. Davidge stood over her, tall and terrible. "And so, what are you waiting for?" she said. "Do it! Kill me! Show me no mercy! When have you ever shown me mercy? Father, when did you ever show me a moment's love?" He looked down at her small, battered body. He threw the George Wind down and unsaddled his car, grazing it over his head. "Do it! Perhaps in death you'll allow me to sit at the table with everyone else for once. Kill me!" The sun set. The birds rustled in the trees and took flight. The door opened. Light pooled into the dark, stony room. The waft-proof field, operated at a huge expense, hummed slightly as the door swung open. 3 people stood in the doorway, 2 tall and 1 much shorter. They entered the room. It was a large, clean room with a small frameless bed on the floor in the far corner. Several trays, stale with the remains of partially eaten food, lay on the floor near the door. In the back corner of the room, a figure huddled against the wall, hiding, shunning the light. "Here she is," Davidge said, "and you're welcome to her." Vrock crawled on the floor, a mere shell of the magnificent fighter who was nigh unstoppable just weeks earlier. Davidge couldn't kill her. She was mad and insane, and his conscience was at work, not allowing him to proceed with her murder. Inez had treated her wounds and repaired the teeth that Davidge had destroyed, but the girl herself was lost in madness, mumbling, speaking to her dead family, afraid of everything, the effects of the Black Hat's strange medicine worn off and gone. Balor, king of Xandar, approached the cowering figure. "Vrock," he said. "Vrock, it is I. Balor, your brother." The figure stood and spoke in a halting, broken voice. "I have no brother. All my brothers are dead. I killed them. I miss them. No, Vrock, I still live, and I'm going to take you home. We are eager to have you. We wish to take care of you." "I have no home. I'm the 11th daughter." Balor sat down next to her. She cringed for a moment and then huddled up next to him. "I killed you, Bal. I'm sorry." I know, Vrock, and we wish to apologize to you for all the cruelty that was inflicted and for all the blame that was wrongly placed." "The 11th daughter?" she shrieked. Balor unwrapped her from her robe, her blueberry hair standing out in the dim light. "Shh, it's just a number. Just a number, Vrock. Just a silly number. It means nothing. Let me take you home." "May I sit at the table? May I please sit at the table?" You may. You may sit with us and share your heart and eat your fill." He cradled her, and moaning, she settled into his arms. Balor looked up. "Captain, Great Countess, I will take her now back to Xandar and give her there the home she never had. Perhaps, under our care, the spark of her sanity can be recovered. Perhaps she'll have peace at last." He picked her up, her trembling body small in his arms, their heads of blueberry hair a matching set. "Imagine, if you will, Captain, always being at fault, everything blamed on you. Everything. A bad business transaction, a failed crop, even the weather. There was a failed crop one year, and the people came to my father's door to demand help. Instead of helping them, he put Vrock on trial for being the cause of the failure. She was barely 10 years old and was standing trial for a bad harvest. She was convicted and suffered a lash from every farmer who lost their crops, and the people accepted that as recompense. The 11th daughter, the bringer of bad luck, had her punishment. Lashed and held in state at 10 years of age, and that wasn't the last time my father allowed the people to vent their anger on this worthless 11th daughter. She was tormented first by her own family, by her own people, and then by the Black Hats. She couldn't endure. Her mind is snapped. Davidge looked at the ground. And then she was tortured by me, he said quietly, all of his former fury turning to shame. As we fought, I wanted her to feel all the pain I could inflict upon her. You had cause to be angry. I am the Lord of Blanchefort. I should be bigger than that. They walked out of the castle into the usual bright sunshine of the north. I have abolished all laws and customs regarding the 11th daughter back on Xandar. I was amazed how rooted the custom was, how ingrained, and how resistant the people were to let it go. But upon pain of law, upon my reign, no 11th daughter will ever be treated as she was again. I swear it. They approached the king's sky car. Several attendants waited at attention. A small woman got out of the sky car. She was dressed in light Xandar veils. Her blue hair was ringed and set, and though she was lightly dressed, she seemed not to feel the bone-chilling cold. The lady was tiny. She was like Princess Marleth in miniature. Lord and Countess Blanchefort, please allow me to introduce to you my consort and future queen, Zoladera of Xandar, formerly Zoladera of Vane. The woman bowed in a courtly fashion, the shadow mark on her face impossible to miss. Around her neck she wore a tiny charm in the shape of a seal embossed with a number 1. Davidge tipped her hat, and Sig nodded to her. Your consort, King? A black hat? Is she one of the ones you rescued? She is. She was the one trying to lead the group, but she is a fine woman, and I am fortunate to have her at my side. And I am pleased to say the other 43 are also doing quite well. They are treasures, indeed. Davidge smiled. Well, hearty congratulations to you both. It appears House Xandar is destined to always be blue-haired. It is certain, Balor said with a chuckle. Well then, take your sister home, good king, and with love, perhaps she might recover and live out her life in peace after all. Well, that is my hope. Gently, Balor gave Vrock's tiny form to the attendants, and they seated her within the sky car, her robed form small and trembling in the seat. Balor turned to Davidge and Sigillus and bowed. As always, Lord and Countess Blanchefort, I am your humble friend and ally. Sig smiled. It seems that the people of Xandar have their king at long last, and what wonders you will create together, hand in hand. Safe journey to you, Balor, King of Xandar. Blessings be upon you, great Countess, and may your unborn son be well favored. Speed well, Davidge said. And with that, Balor, Zoladera, and the attendants seated themselves in the sky car, and moments later it was gone. Davidge and Sig watching it climb into the heavens. And with that, we conclude chapter 27, The George Wind. So I couldn't end the story without resolving Princess Vrock's arc. Last time we saw her, she was kicking some ass in the communications room, beating Kai and Inez to a real pulp. But then that was the last we saw of her, and you can't really conduct yourself like that story. You introduced this character, you made her a villain, you gotta resolve her arc. And you also can't make her a pushover. A lot of stories in the modern sense, set for the quote-unquote modern audience, are incompetent boobs. They barely pose a challenge to the hero, and that's not the way a villain should be. A villain should be tough, and Princess Vrock acquitted herself quite well. She was more than a match for everybody involved. Eventually, she just got worn down, and the George Wind was introduced in Book 1. It was the Los Capricos weapon of Captain Davidge's mother's side, and his mother was a known Black Widow, a lady who engaged in duels and things like that ladies aren't normally given to do. And her George Wind is just a little, like a rapier that you can use telepathically. You don't have to hold it. It just floats and will follow your commands. And he found in sword fighting Princess Vrock, she was just too fast and too good with her light Baron, so he needed to match her light sword with another one. So the George Wind worked perfectly. He put a beating on Vrock, but just like a trooper, she was tough till the end until she could take no more. But Davidge couldn't bring himself to kill her. It's just not in his nature. They captured her, put her in a WAF-proof cell, and then eventually King Balor came and took his sister home and was remorseful for how she was treated. We will, in later books, see Balor, King Zoladera of the Xandar 44, and Princess Vrock again, and we'll see how Vrock does under their care if she regains a bit of her sanity and is able to live a life of peace. We'll see. But they do make returns. The Xandar 44, as I mentioned, all these black hats that Cara Hill had freed during the Battle of Xandar, they play an instrumental role as Xandar becomes the first Zaffin world to join the League. They petitioned, made their case, and were accepted into the League, but that didn't go down well with the Zaffin Armada, especially when you got the likes of Camilla of Sarander and many others who just don't want that kind of indignity to go unchecked. A lot of crazy things happened in and around Xandar, and the Xandar 44 were instrumental in helping Xandar weather this initial phase of craziness. They did good work for the planet Xandar, and we see them again later on, and we see that Davidge and Sig's unborn son, Lord Cable, eventually has some close dealings with one of the Xandar 44, number 6 specifically of the Xandar 44, Domino of Holly. So that's that chapter. Next week is another chapter 27 or chapter 28. This one's called In Elysium. And then after that is just a few epilogues. And then we are done with the book. So next week we will conclude the Hazards of the Old Ones. So until then, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out.